Hello and welcome. You're watching NewsX with me, Devika Chopra, and our top focus right now. As per reports, the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf government has taken over $13 billion in foreign loans in the previous fiscal year. This is the second highest amount in history. And all of this is to repay maturing external debt and cushion the shrinking foreign exchange reserves of Pakistan. So during the fiscal year of 2019 to 20, which ended on the 30th of June, the country actually received $13.2 billion worth of gross loans from both bilateral and multilateral lenders, including the IMF as well as commercial creditors. And all of this is based on data that has been compiled by the Ministry of Economic Affairs. So out of this $29.2 billion that has been received, $19.2 billion has been used to in fact repay the maturing external debt, and the remaining balance has been added to external public and publicly guaranteed debt by Pakistan. So since repayments have now been made by contracting new foreign loans, it has all increased the cost of debt servicing for Pakistan. Joining me on the broadcast is Dr. Gail Awadh, who is a senior foreign journalist, Sharad Goli, economist, as well as Sumit Peer, political analyst, with me on the broadcast as well. Let me begin this conversation with Sharad. Sharad, like we've been discussing how Pakistan's economy is on the brink of collapse, I believe that we perhaps need to be having a different conversation now about what this means as far as China is concerned and how China could be using this as an opportunity to buy off parts of Pakistan.
Yes, Devika. From the last time when we discussed this particular subject on your channel, I mean, the viewers must be wondering that we keep talking of the Pakistan's economic collapse, which seems like imminent, but every time it manages to stay afloat. So is the situation which our viewers need to understand, that we take the major funding agencies, we take the World Bank, we take IMF, we take the Asian Development Bank, and we take some of the dear friends, as you said, China for that matter, which has already given 488 odd million dollars, to Pakistan recently. Now, the catch-22 situation before the lenders is that we have something called a debt trap. A debt trap is basically from a borrower's perspective. Here is a lender's trap, that it's a very difficult situation for them. Either they lend and help Pakistan stay afloat, which is keeping their earlier debt secure, or they have to, if they stop lending, Pakistan fails as an economy and they lose their entire lending which they have given to Pakistan. I think that is what is keeping Pakistan afloat, and it's like a international Ponzi scheme which is going on, where
Yes.
you keep borrowing for repaying another debt, and you keep all your lenders happy, and ultimately when the whole pyramid collapses, somebody or everybody is going to lose. But having said that, Devika, I'd like to make a very important point here. As an economist, and I follow international economy very, very closely. If I was and you'll be very surprised to know, and our viewers will be, that World Bank, IMF, Asian Development Bank, AIIB, they are not very coordinated in their lending. The need of the hour is that if all these lending agencies coordinate between themselves and they decide unilaterally that, okay, we are not going to lend to this rogue country because it is spending one fifth of the expenditure is going on defense. I mean, it's going on. What are you spending on encouraging terrorism? Is that what you're borrowing? So this means effectively IMF and World Bank are lending to promote terrorism indirectly. I mean, that's what you're trying to do. So what kind of compulsion is there for these agencies to come together? If they come together, I can tell you Pakistan will fail in less than a month because their forest reserves have fallen below $10 billion.
Okay, Dr. Awadh, then I want to ask you, and let me play devil's advocate for a second there, because every time we have conversations about why is it that countries are going ahead and lending to Pakistan, or why is it that the IMF is continuously lending to Pakistan, despite knowing that it's not like the money is going towards development of the people of Pakistan, or even, towards the economy. People come out and say that a destabilized Pakistan is much more dangerous than what we're looking at right now. So are we saying that we will let Pakistan continue, being the way it is? That we'll continue lending money because we can't have a disintegrated Pakistan because, the nuclear weapons may fall into the hands of the wrong people. So are we looking at a future where Pakistan can continuously just keep borrowing money over and over again to pay off other debts?
Well, I think partially, yes, I agree with you. There is a part of the political angle to it, but there are other angle also you must take in consideration the geopolitical importance of Pakistan. And remember, there are only like Saudi Arabia, UAE, and China, and the United States. Depending, Pakistan external borrowing depends on these four countries. So, in America, play a major role in the financial assistance to Pakistan in terms of their export is mainly to US, and also the COVID-19 have had its impact on the United States. So there will be less of investment. So there is a challenging, of course, indicators of Pakistani failing economy. But having said that, I wouldn't say that it is the current government. It has been long before that the government of Pakistan, successful government of Pakistan, had depended on the short-term loans, which have been using it and the from different banks and from the Asian loan, as our colleagues have been saying it, and from the World Bank and IMF. So I think the prospect of the Pakistan economy, according to the standards being carried by international agencies, is saying that it is one of the 10th economy in the world, maybe in the road of recovery. But it is still unlikely, because it is still borrowing the money. It is paying 1/10. I mean, 2/3 of the money they are taking is actually they are paying back loans, as you said. And moreover, also to add to it, they will be needing another $15 billion for the next fiscal years, with 2021, 22. So therefore, they are only, it is a kind of a palliative treatment you are giving to an ailing economy.
No, that's what exactly. And, Sharad Kohli also described it, and we've also said it, that this is a large Ponzi scheme, basically, Sumit Peer, where you're just borrowing to pay off, another debt. I mean, how long can this cycle go on for? And under Imran Khan itself, since August, 2018, it's $29.2 billion in terms of foreign loans in the past 2 years. We're looking at, that's a huge amount.
Ma'am, you're absolutely right. The problem here in Pakistan is very complex. What Dr. Saab and Sharad rightly said, it didn't start yesterday. It has been happening for a lot of time. But ironically, when Imran Khan came into power, he came with a big nationalistic plan saying we are not going to borrow any money, we are going to liberate Pakistan and all that. But then all has fallen through the trap. Now, what we have seen here is that, what we typically call, it's called debt financing. I take a debt to pay my EMI. That's what Pakistan is doing. Greenhousing of loans. I take one loan, pay this loan, then I take loan from A and pay B, I take from B, pay C, and like, this is Hindi mein kehte hain topi gumana. This is literally topi gumana of the Ponzi scheme, which is happening in Pakistan, and it has made no difference under Imran Khan. In fact, under Imran Khan, it has gone worse. I'll give you one interesting data about Pakistan. Defense budget, $8 billion declared. But if you add the nuclear part and the national securities group, which they have formed now, it becomes $11 billion. Same Pakistan puts for health only $151 million. 11 million for defense, for health, $151 million only. You can see the difference. You see how much they care for Pakistanis and how much common people of Pakistan are relevant in the military affairs. Fauji Tanzim does a business of $20 billion. They don't pay iota of tax. Now these Faujis get tax relief in the tune of $300 million. So this is the real story of Pakistan. And ironically, out of this $8 billion, ma'am, $2 billion goes towards the pensions of Faujis. $2 to $4 billion go to China for buying Chinese toys, which are of use. There's no Chinese tanks and all, which are outdated, which they sell to Pakistan. So it is, what you see in Pakistan is not only a debt trap, it is the government, the Chinese and everybody are going together and making Pakistan fail. Now everybody is looking for his pie. Imran Khan for his pie, Chinese are looking for their pie. Everybody is saying, what do I get out of this loot? And the biggest beneficiaries are China. Because in Chinese, every clause, there is always a clause in Chinese that if you're not able to pay me, I'll get the administrative control of this part of your territory.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And China's doing it, right? All over the world.
It's doing it. It's part of every of their international debts. And Pakistan will become a Chinese colony soon. It's a matter of time.
Exactly. So, Ambassador Mukherjee, on that note, now, this is something that Pakistan has done with China back in 63 as well, right? They gave off a portion, just gifted a portion that never belonged to them, the Shaksgam Valley, to China. Are we looking at then China perhaps buying, buying off the whole of Gilgit-Baltistan or even further parts into Pakistan, just so that, they can support Pakistan economically?
Well, that is exactly the point which I had wanted to make to Dr. Awad, which is that it's not whether Imran Khan is fully responsible or his predecessors, but under Imran, Pakistan has lost more and more sovereignty to China. The debt trap which Pakistan was already in has worsened because of Imran's inability to rein in the army and Imran's determination to go full. At first, he used to say, you're right about that, that he doesn't want to get into a debt trap. But he has actually demonstrated that he has actually fallen very neatly into the Chinese arms. And therefore, as Sumit very correctly pointed out, Pakistan is already a semi-vassal state, and it is going to become a fully vassal state of China if it is not careful, because according to the facts and figures which your channel has made available, which is very useful, it is clear that it is in a situation where further debt is going to pay off some part of the debt but not the interest, and then they have to borrow more, etc. So it's not just a Ponzi scheme, because each time when they will default with the Chinese, they will lose part of either their own territory or our territory, which they have occupied, which is even more serious for us. And therefore, we are watching while our territory is being handed over to the Chinese. So it's a very, very serious situation for India. On top of that is the corona pandemic, which Imran has not been able to control. He has not been able to give adequate money for health and for other facilities so much required for the Pakistani common man and woman. And he is completely in the hands of the army. So if I was in Pakistan, I would be looking at a very, very dark future, because I don't see how they're going to come out of it at all.
Absolutely. So Dr. Awad, let me bring you into the conversation here, because like I said, I mean, somewhere what really happens, the fate of Pakistan as far as China is concerned, is not something that India needs to bother itself with right now, because we have more pressing issues. But as far as Gilgit-Baltistan is concerned, that is our territory. And do we then need to go ahead and make some sort of, preemptive moves as far as that particular territory is concerned? Because you already have China that's building pressure along the borders, and continuously they've moved away from, their focus from Ladakh. They're now focusing on, disturbances in Himachal Pradesh. God forbid the territory, Pakistan decides to give away the whole of it to China, then we're looking at serious trouble.
I don't think India should take any proactive more than what they have been already taken right now. India diplomatically on the global issues or in regard to China and Pakistan have always been a successful story. So therefore, to press more points at this stage, whether militarily or any kind of, a preemptive kind of a strike, which may be sensing some of the decision makers, I don't think it is the stage right now. What India needs to concentrate is to make sure that the Pakistanis does not fall the full trap into the Chinese, because this is a matter of security concern to India and a national security at risk.
Okay.
So therefore, I think India need to make sure that these noises around in Pakistan administered Kashmir, where they are making investment of the Chinese, this is where the alarms has been ringing. And India should really focus more on those issues of how to challenge it and what is the contagious plan, not militarily, but politically and economically.
Okay, but then that's exactly my point. Then how do you do it economically? What is it that India can really do? And I'm going to get everybody's perspective on this, starting with you, Dr. Awad.
Well, I think India can do it by, the IMF and World Bank, they don't pay you money actually for no reason. They have always attached strings to it. So there is always, you need to make some conditions. You have to fulfill all the hikes of the taxes on the people. And I think there is social unrest as much as in any other country post-pandemic or during this pandemic of COVID-19. Everybody is feeling the heat. And the economic growth in Pakistan is already falling. So there is a huge impact on the public. And I think public resentment, whether it is anti-China or anti-establishment, it will be rising on the days to come. So I think India can build up on these issues.
Okay, right. Important point raised, and I'll come to that in just a moment. Ambassador Mukherjee, I'll also come to you. Sharad Kohli. How do we then deal with this issue economically, as everybody is saying that India needs to? I mean, we need to do something, right? We can't just continue talking about it and say, the doom is here, Pakistan's doom is here, it will collapse in September. We don't really know that, because it already has so many countries that are willing to supply and keep it supply money and keep it afloat.
I think India, Devika, right now is in a best position diplomatically and internationally to accelerate any propaganda that it does. And if India can, if America can follow India's footsteps in banning Chinese apps, if Australia can listen to what India is doing on China, I really don't think a similar propaganda of India can do on economic front across the world. What India needs to do is the only country which India will not be able to pursue is China. But apart from China, I think India would be able to convince all the other trading partners, and most importantly, Devika, most importantly, if India can exercise its influence on these lending agencies, because you see, we have to, that commercial credit is very expensive. It is far more expensive than IMF, World Bank, and Asian Development Bank. So I think apart from the commercial credit, what India needs to do is to rake up the matter with IMF, World Bank, and Asian. If these three agencies, and of course AIIB, if these 3 to 4 agencies are lobbied and they are convinced that you should stop lending to Pakistan, I think that will be the best thing which India can do, and it will bring Pakistan down to knees. It is already on the brink of an FATF blacklisting, because and it's very easy for India to do, Devika, for the simple reason, if you look at the economic parameters of Pakistan, the inflation has shot up more than 15%. Your currency value has dropped by over 1/5. I mean, your fiscal deficit is an all-time low. Your economic growth has come down to half. So I think it is very easy if you put this on the platter and serve it to IMF and all that. God knows what Pakistan is informing these agencies. I think India can run an economic propaganda that these lending agencies should stop funding Pakistan.
Okay, all right. Ambassador Mukherjee, you wanted to come in there, but I also have to pose a question to you. Like I said, before you joined in, ma'am, I was asking the others as well that there has always been this notion that a stable Pakistan is a lot better for its neighbors in the world compared to a destabilized Pakistan, given its nuclear program, nuclear weapons program, and the danger that they may fall into the hands of the wrong people. And that's the reason why, countries want to keep Pakistan afloat, because that danger is always there. But what about the public sentiment that is, brewing in several parts of Pakistan that no longer want to be with Islamabad?
First of all, let me put it in a perspective that we don't know if Pakistan's nuclear weapons are in safe hands, okay? They don't have a command and control system like responsible nuclear weapon states like India have. Secondly, Pakistan is not a responsible nuclear weapon state because it has proliferated. It has proliferated to North Korea, etc., etc. Thirdly, the people who are in charge of Pakistan now, the army, are fundamentalists. So if Pakistan breaks up into a rump state, those nuclear weapons will continue to be controlled by its army, the deep state. So this theory, which was very popular when the peaceniks were in power in India, that a stable Pakistan is safer for India, I will only accept up to a point. The second issue is, can we pressure the IMF, etc.? I think we should turn it around and look at it this way. IMF will only give attached with huge strings, which are not acceptable to the Pakistani army. What is keeping Pakistan afloat are, on one hand, loans from China and the other loans from Saudi Arabia.
Yes.
Saudi Arabia is drying up. So it is becoming a vassal state of China. We are in a situation of confrontation with a militaristic, aggressive China. We have a problem in our northern border. The Chinese would love the Pakistanis to open up a second border. And we are a maritime power. So we have to think of the South China Sea and the Indian Ocean. In such a situation, we have to play our cards in such a way that we have to discourage Pakistan and its adventurous leadership to even think of anything aggressive vis-a-vis India. So I would tell Dr. Awad, it is not us thinking of preemptive strikes. It's Pakistan and its terrorists which are camped on our border who may be pushed into making strikes into India. As far as the FATF is concerned, yes, Germany is going to take over the presidency, and the Pakistanis are afraid that Germany may work actively to actually put it in the blacklist. That would be a great development for India. So I think that right now, our cards are very clear. We have to contain and control Pakistan so that if we do get into a conflict with China, we don't have two fronts plus the ocean. So we have to make sure that the Pakistani side of it is completely under control under whichever means that we can think of, which perhaps we cannot discuss on a TV channel.
Okay, all right. So with Peer, I want to bring you in here because I have to ask you, like I said, that, as Ambassador Mukherjee also said, that there was this theory always that a stable Pakistan is much better for India. But why are we not looking at doing what Pakistan and China have been doing for years in our, border states as well? They've been fueling insurgency. Why are we not looking at supporting several other states, within Pakistan who want to move away from Islamabad? Why are we not looking at perhaps supporting the freedom movement of Xinjiang, of the Uyghurs, the Tibet freedom movement, so that we know, imagine not having a border with Pakistan in the first, with China in the first place, and, getting access back to Gilgit-Baltistan at the same time, having smaller stable states, which could be pro-India compared to a large Pakistan, which is willingly falling for China's, debt trap.
I think, Devika ji, you stole the thunder out of my argument. This is exactly what I was going to speak about, because my position on Pakistan for last few years is very same. Pakistan is an imminent threat. It's a present, past, and a futuristic threat for our generations to come. If we want a stabler future for our generations, the Pakistan is weak. We have to go all out in the interest of our national security to break it into 4 parts. We have Balochis who want our help. There are other people who want our help. I am even of the view that Balochis should be given political asylum here. Baloch leaders, we have to take back our POK, and we have to immediately go and contest, this CPC, because this CPC is on our land. We should take the court case to International Court of Justice. How can Pakistan and China build a land which is the territory of India? POK is our territory, which is Pakistan. It doesn't belong to Pakistan. We have to contest this. And we have to do whatever we can do, support all the factions within Pakistan. Of course, we don't want to give arms and military. We don't promote terrorism, but anything beyond that, whatever we want to do to bring it, and even we should change our unified China policy, because unified China policy has given us nothing. And Pakistan today, we are talking of a Wahhabi, Jihadi, Sunni Pakistan, which is dominated by a Punjabi army, which is dominating Balochis. They are killing their own people. They are killing other ethnic minorities, Hindus, Christians, Sikhs, even Ahmadiyas. So this is not a Pakistan. This is a Sunni, Wahhabi, Jihadi Pakistan army. We have to take it the way it is. Break Pakistan into 4 windows, 4 pieces, and get our peace, ma'am. There's a window to act. Pakistan is all-time low. And these opportunities may not come again. History may not give us this opportunity again. So do whatever it helps in our long-term national interest.
Okay, all right.
We have all options open.
Okay, I'm going to have to wrap this up soon, but let me give in a last word to all of the other panelists as well. Sharad Kohli, starting with you. Like I said, now we have to worry about, Pakistan perhaps selling off some parts of Gilgit-Baltistan or starting very serious and heavy activity with China in that area. What is it that India can do then to at least secure that portion?
Well, I think winning over Pakistan's friends, barring China, of course, seems to be the best strategy, and India should try and convince the world that Pakistan it's a farce, that Pakistan is a democracy. It's definitely not a democracy. I was following up the Pakistan budget, Devika, which was passed in the month of June, and they have set up a National Development Council under Imran Khan. Would you believe, National Development Council is meant for economic development. All the portfolio of ministers should be included in that. Would you believe that the chief of the army is a member of the National Development Council? So I think democracy is a failed concept in Pakistan. I think if India lobbies this concept, and lot of these loans are being given because of Pakistan being a democracy, and it's a sham. Pakistan is definitely. So I think it's easy for India to be. I agree with Sumit that this is the best time when India can lobby. India has emerged as a voice which the world listens, and I think this is the best time to make that voice reach the world.
Okay, all right. Dr. Awadh, 30 seconds to you, sir.
Well, I think first we have to see the political crisis, economical and military crisis in Pakistan in 3 dimensions, and where the Pakistan army has been playing a major role in destabilizing the country and internal security. Now they are more involved with the economical situation. So therefore, the grim situation of the economy of Pakistan, including the accumulative taxes and hikes and unemployment and low growth, will be having a major impact on Pakistan's future. So I think the future politically is very bleak, but Pakistan can still survive. And I don't think India has to take any chance, nor any Pakistani can take a chance of any provoking act against India, because we all know the existence of Pakistan depends on India.
Okay, all right. Ambassador Mukherjee, last word to you, ma'am.
Well, thank you. I just wanted to say that the moment is important for India to ensure that Pakistan does not lose any more of its sovereignty to China. We have already a huge problem with the Chinese, and the worst thing that can happen to us is to make an enemy, a weak enemy, Pakistan, into a vassal state of China, because then it will be an active and much more powerful enemy, because the Chinese will just manipulate the Pakistanis to take action whenever they want against us. So it's not at all in our interest either to see the Pakistanis increasingly lose their sovereignty. And for that, there are many, many measures, some of which have been outlined here today. And I would completely go with those measures. We have to act now. We can't sit back and wait and see how the situation is going to deteriorate as the days come by. It's a very bad situation.
Absolutely. On that note, I've completely run out of time, but I thank all of our panelists for joining us to take this debate forward. Thank you.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.